Oh my God, everybody panic. There is a chip shortage. How the heck are we going to eat our fish and chips?
Not those chips, Matt.
Oh yeah, you're right. The chip shortage I'm talking about is actually microchips. And that matters to new cars because they are very high tech, like this Audi RS e-tron GT. Thankfully, this brand new car isn't actually affected by a worldwide chip shortage, but some other models are. And I'm going to tell you all about what is behind this chip shortage, how it affects new cars, and exactly which ones are affected the worst. I'm Matt Watson, and you're watching Carwow.
Buying a new car? Then head to Carwow, and my team will help you find your next car at a fair price. Carwow, your one-stop car buying comparison site.
Cars are getting more and more high tech. They're absolutely rammed with technology. They're basically computers on wheels. I mean, this has got all the same kind of brains and stuff as my mobile phone. They are absolutely packed with massive screens, and all this kind of stuff needs a microchip to run them. And microchips are basically tiny computers. But these clever electronics aren't just in posh limousines, they're in every normal car too. In fact, the latest Nissan Qashqai has 50% more electronic sensors on it than the old car. Some of these are pretty ordinary, and they've been fitted to cars for years. Stuff like the ABS sensors that detect when a wheel is slipping, or the oxygen sensors in the exhaust that check whether the engine is running properly. But some are much more high tech, like the ones that help with blind spot detection, or the ones that can sense if you're about to hit a parked car and automatically makes the car apply its brakes. And because they're more complicated, they need more powerful computers to monitor them. But these computer chips aren't like normal car parts. They have to be built in ultra clean factories with no dust nor static electricity. Bit like how NASA builds satellites and Mars rovers. This means they're really expensive and take ages to produce. So if there's a huge demand for these chips, why is there a sudden shortage? Well, it's because they're really hard to make, and so only a few countries around the entire world can actually build them. In fact, around 70% of all the microchips used in modern cars come from just one supplier in Taiwan. And these factories don't just build electronics for cars, they also make chips for other consumer electronics, like your phone. Normally, tech firms are first in line. They want the fastest, most powerful chips, which are also the most expensive ones. Car brands don't update their tech as often as companies that make phones or tablets, so they tend to use slightly older, less powerful chips. And these are lower priority for the chip manufacturers because they just aren't as profitable. But demand also plays a big part. So if you suddenly decide you don't need as many parts because you aren't building as many cars, your supplier might stick you to the back of the queue. And this is exactly what happened in 2020, all because of coronavirus. Think back to when we were in lockdown and all the car dealerships were shut. People weren't going out and buying brand new cars, were they? No. You were sitting at home dreaming of when you could go outside again. And because no one was buying a new car, all the car makers had to try and save as much cash as possible. Loads of them closed their factories, furloughed their staff and stopped buying components. And that includes the all-important microchips. But while car makers were down in the dumps, tech firms were onto a winner. They knew that people stuck at home wanted a load of new technology to keep themselves occupied. I'm talking about 5G phones, new laptops and games consoles like the new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. So the microchip factories suddenly got loads of orders from the technology companies and fewer orders from car makers. That all seems fine and dandy, but the trouble arrived when people wanted to start buying cars again. Suddenly, car manufacturers rushed to order new chips so they could ramp up production again. But the chip companies couldn't just switch their production lines on and off. It takes a long time and a lot of money to stop making one type of microchip and to start making another. So some car makers were facing a 6-month delay before they get their electronics. But if you thought this was bad, things got even worse. This time, it wasn't to do with coronavirus, it was the weather's fault. Specifically, the weather in Texas. You see, 12% of the world's microchips are made in the US of A, and loads of these come from factories in Texas. But Texas was hit by one of the worst winter storms in the state's history in February of this year. This led to widespread power cuts, which shut down some of the factories building the microchips. Infineon, which runs one of the factories, reckoned it was going to take 4 months to get production back to normal after this storm. And on top of that, every chip Infineon planned to make for the next year had already been reserved. If you don't want to wait for a factory order, click on the pop-out banner up there to go to Carwow and check out what cars dealers have in stock right now, both new ones and nearly new cars. Anyway, back to the chips. Amazingly, the Texas snowstorm wasn't the only thing that's happened this year. In March, another microchip factory had to shut down. This time it was the Renesas plant in Japan. the factory actually caught fire, and all these delays mean plenty of car makers are facing another shortage of microchips. In some cases, manufacturers have stopped offering some optional extras because they've run out of the microchips needed to build them. For instance, Peugeot has had its problems. It's had to fit normal analog dials, old school ones, to its 308 rather than the digital dials you get on the 3008. And Renault downsized the digital driver's display in the Arcana SUV and got rid of wireless charging. Ram, the truck maker, also changed the rear view camera on the 1500 pickup from a standard item to an optional extra to use fewer microchips. But this was just the tip of the iceberg, because plenty of manufacturers have stopped some production lines altogether. Mercedes plans to pause GLC production because it has run out of microchips for it. And Mazda had to cut production by 7,000 cars in the first quarter of this year for the same reason. Mini temporarily closed its factory in Oxford, where it builds 3-door and 5-door hatchbacks, and the new Mini Electric was affected too. Jaguar and Land Rover have also been affected. They've paused production of the XC, XF and F-Type, as well as the Discovery Sport and Range Rover Evoque. The Volkswagen Group has already built 100,000 fewer cars in 2021 than it originally planned, partly because it shut the factory that makes the Volkswagen Touareg, the Porsche Cayenne and the Audi Q7 and Q8. BMW has had to slow down production of the X1 and X2 hybrids due to chip shortages, and Ford put the brakes on its F-150, Explorer and Bronco Sport factories. Subaru reportedly closed one of its US factories for the last few weeks of April, and Nissan could be about to pause production of its X-Trail factory in Japan. But one of the biggest losers is Stellantis. This group includes brands like Fiat, Chrysler, Peugeot, Citroën and Vauxhall. It had to temporarily slow down 8 of its 44 factories around the world. This meant it built 190,000 fewer cars than it was expecting to in the first quarter of this year. So how long is this shortage going to last? Well, the microchip maker Infineon reckons that around 2.5 million cars could be delayed by the chip shortage in the first half of this year. And other estimates say that this number could rise to 5 million cars by the end of 2021. Now I can believe that, especially because Ford reckons it'll lose out on building around 1 million cars just on its own by the end of this year. But it's not all bad news. Some brands, such as Hyundai, weren't affected so much by the shortage because they cunningly stockpiled microchips in advance. And you can bet your bottom dollar that after all these delays, many other manufacturers will be doing the same in future. But there's another side to this story, and it's to do with electric cars like this Audi e-tron GT. EVs require more complicated electronics to deal with their motors and batteries than a normal petrol or diesel powered car. And most new electric cars come with loads of new connectivity features, like the 5G technology in the new BMW iX that lets it communicate with traffic lights and other cars. This is pretty similar to the tech in new mobile phones, and that means that car makers ordering fancy 5G components will be worth more to the big microchip companies than before. So, although demand for microchips isn't going away anytime soon, the next generation of high-tech EVs might not be so affected by delays as today's models. Now, if you want to see what I think is the best all-round electric car on sale today, put a link up there. It should be popping out in the top right-hand corner of the screen. You can go watch the video. Is it this, or is it not? If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. Also, comment below any kind of other videos you'd like us to do. If you want to watch some more videos, click on the windows there. And if you click on the box, you can download the CarWow app. It's completely free. You can use it to browse all our reviews and see how much money we can save you on a new car. Also, it has a special number plate reader, so you can scan any car's number plate and it'll tell you how much that car is currently worth.